Political reporter Sarah Murray. She's outside Trump Tower in New York City. Sarah, how has Donald Trump responded to what we heard from the intelligence community today?
Well, Wolf, Donald Trump, of course, is known for reacting in real time, usually on Twitter. But today, he is uncharacteristically silent in the wake of those hearings. And I want to draw your attention to his tweets from earlier this morning before the hearings began. It appears he was trying to do a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of backtracking. Trump tweeted, "The dishonest media likes saying that I am in agreement with Julian Assange. Wrong. I simply state what he states. It is for the people to make up their own minds as to the truth. The media lies to make it look like I am against, quote, intelligence, when in fact I am a big fan." But of course, Wolf, while Donald Trump has been tweeting Julian Assange, he has not been tweeting the assessments from U.S. intelligence officials. Sean Spicer, who's the incoming White House press secretary, simply pointed to Donald Trump's upcoming briefing tomorrow with heads of the CIA, the FBI, as well as DNI. So maybe we will hear more from Donald Trump about what he thinks of their assessments after that meeting, Wolf.
Is the sense, Sarah, that Trump is attacking the intelligence community because he takes issue with their work or because he doesn't like their conclusions?
Well, he certainly takes issue with their conclusions, Wolf. I've spoken to people who've talked to Donald Trump about this, who are close to Donald Trump, who say that he really does see this as an effort to undermine the legitimacy of his presidency. And when you look at it in total, he lost the popular vote. There are questions about FBI Director James Comey's influence on the election, as well as questions about the Russian hacking. And taken together, that does leave a sour taste in Donald Trump's mouth. He wants to come into the White House feeling like he is the legitimate president, feeling like people are not questioning his victory. And right now, he feels like questions about Russian cyber hacking could potentially undermine that, Wolf.
All right, Sarah Murray reporting from Trump Tower in New York. Thank you. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Chris Collins of New York. He's a member of the Trump transition team. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Yes, good to be with you, Wolf, as always.
Were you satisfied with the level of detail you heard from the intelligence leaders during their hearing up on Capitol Hill today?
Well, certainly I'm looking forward to Mr. Trump's response after he gets the intelligence briefing. But I really think what America needs to also focus on is cyber hacking has been a problem, not only with Russia, but Iran, North Korea, and China. And it's just it's interesting that over the last 8 years, even when China hacked into over 1 million personnel records of the U.S. government, what was President Obama's response? It was much to do about nothing. And now I have to think, you know, what we're seeing, some of the response we're seeing, including expelling the 35 Russians, is trying to poison the well for Donald Trump coming in as president. And we have to ask the question, where has Barack Obama been the last 8 years with Iran, North Korea, and China? And so I think that's another issue we should be talking about.
Well, when the Chinese did hack the Office of Personnel Management, as you point out, back in 2015, and taking information, sensitive information from millions of American government workers, Social Security numbers, and other sensitive information, he did issue a public statement, and he said steps were being taken, and there were some sanctions imposed against China at the same time, with a strong warning to the Chinese to stop it.
Yeah, but that's nothing like they didn't expel 35 Chinese. And they've been stealing our intellectual property for decades, and they continue to try to do it. You know, we've got the other rogue nation states doing likewise. There is a political piece of this. I don't think there's any question about what Barack Obama is doing. It was pointed out before the election. He told Vladimir Putin to, quote, knock it off. That was a pretty lame response right there. And then there was no actions until Donald Trump was elected. Hillary Clinton did lose. And now what you're seeing, not only here, but with the actions that Secretary Kerry has taken with Israel and the UN, the deplorable UN vote that we abstained from, this is political. It's a sore loser in Barack Obama. It is something that is beneath the President of the United States. But we're seeing this, and I think this is all political on the case of Barack Obama trying to delegitimize the election of Donald Trump, who is our president-elect, who won fair and square, 306 electoral college votes. This wasn't even close.
But
so I think that has to be factored in.
Let me just point out, a month before the election, a month before the election, the administration, the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Homeland Security did issue a strong statement saying, and I'll read you a couple sentences, the U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including from U.S. political organizations. And then it went on to say, we believe, based on the scope and sensitivity of these efforts, that only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities. That was a month before the election, and they did begin to take some steps. They went further after the election by expelling 35 Russian diplomats and their families. By the way, do you support that decision to expel those Russian diplomats?
Well, I'm certainly not in a position to do it. I'm going to say I believe that was a political act, and why weren't we expelling others from Iran, from North Korea, and from China over the last 8 years?
Let me just point out, the U.S. and Iran do not have formal diplomatic relations, so there are no Iranian diplomats in Washington, serving in Washington right now. Chinese diplomats, there are plenty of Chinese diplomats here in Washington, but I'm a little confused, Congressman. Do you want stronger U.S. retaliation against Russia, China, and others who might be engaged in these kinds of hacking activities?
Absolutely. I think we need to be stronger in our defense of all of our cyber activities, and we should be sending out, and should have been sending out over the last 8 years, a much stronger response, but across the board, not just Russia.
So why
but also
won't you say you support why won't you say you support the expulsion of the Russian diplomats because of the Russian cyber attacks on the U.S. elections?
Well, because I believe clearly that was a political step taken by Barack Obama after Hillary Clinton lost the election. I would have left it up to Donald Trump as president on January 20, after he is fully briefed on the intelligence, to move forward with his team on how we're going to deal with cybersecurity moving forward. This is a president who's got a couple of weeks left, and I think, again, like what happened in Israel, this was a political step, and it was taken by a president who's only got a couple weeks left.
Donald Trump hasn't always been so critical of the CIA, the U.S. intelligence community. Back in 2014, he tweeted this, and I'll put it up on the screen. You see it right there. The CIA deserves our praise for taking the fight to the enemy in the dark corners of the world. The CIA perseveres, the politicians whine. Doesn't that suggest that this is personal for Trump, not based on some innate skepticism of the U.S. intelligence community? He's simply very sensitive to the suggestion, as you keep making, that all of this is being done to undermine the legitimacy of his election.
I think there's no question that's a big piece of this, that the Democrats cannot get over the fact that Hillary lost, that Obama's legacy is in tatters, and that there is a political piece of this.
But fundamentally, Congressman, do you believe the Russians engaged in cyber attacks against the Democratic National Committee and John Podesta, the Hillary Clinton campaign chairman's Gmail account?
Well, I will stipulate from what I've heard, I can accept that the Chinese were involved in cyber hacking. I don't.
The Chinese or the Russians?
The Russians.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Russians. I just don't accept that it had any impact whatsoever on this election, and that's what I am absolutely in agreement with President-elect Trump, that this is the attempt of the Democrats and certainly Barack Obama to delegitimize his election, and that's what's coloring this entire discussion today.
Because General Clapper would not say if, in fact, it's not the responsibility of the U.S. intelligence community to say whether or it did, in fact, have an impact on the election results. The only thing he was saying, and I assume you agree with him, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Russians were responsible for those cyber attacks, whatever the impact.
I would certainly accept, based on what I've heard, that yes, they were behind it. With a 95% but not 100% assurance. I think Mr. Trump will know more when he has his briefing. But again, we have to keep also putting this in the framework of the political insinuations that are totally inappropriate at this point in time. We will never know what we don't know on anything that impacted the election, and I don't believe it had any impact myself.
Congressman, we have more to discuss. I want you to stick around. We'll continue all of this right after a quick break. We're back with the Republican Congressman Chris Collins of New York. He's a key member of the Trump transition team. Congressman, I want to ask you about Republican plans to repeal and replace Obamacare. Everyone in your party seems to agree that the law should be repealed, but at least so far, they don't agree on a way to replace it or even a timeline for replacing it. The critics, they've pointed out the GOP has had 7 years to get on the same page. Now the Republicans are in charge of the House, the Senate, and the White House. Why is there still so much confusion?
Well, first of all, we will repeal Obamacare here in short order, but that doesn't mean Americans will see any changes in the next 2 years, because those plans for 17 and 18 are locked in. The other thing we should also remember is less than 10% of Americans are getting their health insurance through Obamacare. So I think that's an important point to make. The replacement, we have crafted 6 or 7 slightly different replacement plans. Now we have to come together with one plan, 218 out of 241 Republicans agreeing on this replacement plan. That's going to take us at least 6 months, if not 12 months, to get through. In the meanwhile, we're going to have a status quo relative to people getting their insurance, but it's not going to be easy to get 218 out of 241 Republicans, because we can't count on any Democrat help in getting a replacement plan put in. We have to make sure we take care of all Americans, all the nuances. We're going to be having numerous hearings on this, and we're going to be very careful to make sure that our replacement plan is a plan for the future, whereas we've seen Obamacare implode unto itself. We have to fix the mess that Obama has put us in with runaway costs, very limited options. And so it's going to take us 6 to 12 months to get that replacement plan done. We're going to get input from governors. We're going to get input from insurance companies, hospitals, physicians. We're going to do it right. In the meanwhile, things stay status quo.
Basically,
people don't have to worry about losing their coverage.
So, Congressman, at least for the next 2 years, Obamacare is the law of the land. Is that what you're saying?
Well, Obamacare is. We're going to be repealing some of the mandates, if you will, the employer mandate, the employee mandate, things like...
But if you repeal that,
insurance.
Those are critically important parts. They fund a lot of the people who have insurance, health insurance, under Obamacare. If you start repealing those mandates, where's the money going to come from?
Well, that's a big issue that we're going to be dealing with. Ways and Means, our committee on taxes, is going to be dealing with that piece. Those of us on Energy and Commerce are going to be dealing with the expansion of Medicaid. But for the time being, all the folks that have insurance, those plans are set. They can't be changed this year. They effectively cannot be changed next year. You are correct. There are financial impacts that we're going to have to deal with because of the mess that Obamacare has caused us, the runaway costs in many cases because of the minimum benefit package, or in some cases other changes that have driven up the cost of private insurance, corporate insurance, the 30 versus 40-hour work week. These have all got to be dealt with. They're very complicated, but we are going to repeal Obamacare. The details of that will be out. I expect we'll be doing this by the end of February relative to the repeal. The replacement's going to come, I think, sometime late this year. That gives us time to do it right, and I think America understands that.
Congressman, the Vice President, Joe Biden, just granted an interview to PBS, and he had a specific, very pointed message for the president-elect. Listen to this.
Not in all caps. And an exclamation
Grow up, Donald. Grow up.
Grow up, Donald. Grow up. He goes on to say, time to be an adult. You're president. You got to do something. Show us what you have. You're going to propose it on legislation. We're going to get to debate it. Let the public decide. Let them vote in Congress. It's going to be much clearer what he's for and against and what we're for and against now that it's going to get down to actually discussing in details issues that affect people's lives. So he's telling the president-elect, grow up, Donald, grow up, time to be an adult. You're president. Your reaction?
That's a pathetic response. I think it's beneath the office of the vice president. It shows just the angst of the loss of this election by Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the adult in the room. You've already seen the reactions in the economic front. companies saying they're bringing jobs back to America. They're creating new jobs in America. They understand where Donald Trump stands on trade. Donald Trump, as president-elect, is getting more accomplished, frankly, on the economic front than Barack Obama did in his 8 years. I think that's the sign of very good things to come. America has a true leader, someone that's going to stand up to our enemies, going to stand tough, but also make sure that he takes care of all Americans, whether it's health care, whether it's jobs, and so forth. So I'm very disappointed that someone like Vice President Biden, who I do respect, would make a comment like that. I really, it's beneath his office and beneath the vice president that I know.
Very quickly, I just want to ask you a local question involving our hometown of Buffalo and a fellow Buffalonian,
Right.
Carl Palladino. You had a fundraiser for the Trump transition today. Was he there?
No, Carl Palladino was not there. Carl was not involved in the Kellyanne fundraiser we did, very successful fundraiser that Donald Trump asked us to put together to help fund the transition team. These folks that are right now on the landing teams in the agencies, a way to get them paid. So at his request, we put together a very successful fundraiser today in Buffalo with Kellyanne Conway. She was great. Everything went off smoothly, but the direct answer, no. Carl Palladino was not involved in the event.
Because, as you know, he caused a huge stir when he recently told the local Buffalo magazine that he wants Michelle Obama to be, quote, let loose in the outbacks of Zimbabwe where she can live with gorillas, and for President Obama to catch mad cow disease and die. Have you spoken with him about that? I know he apologized, but that is so outrageous.
Yeah, those comments cannot be defended, so I would certainly not be one to ever attempt that. They were something beyond the pale. I know that Carl, unfortunately, he did say what he said, and he has apologized for that. They can't be defended, and again, he was not part of today's fundraiser.
All right, Congressman Chris Collins of our fellow hometown, Buffalo, New York, thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Wolf.
Thank you. Coming